Hey friends, Jonathan here, and today I want to talk to you about a little something that I like to call active stretching. So a couple days ago on Facebook, I made a post, a little meme post. There was, the little guy with the little thing, and he says, change my mind, guy. And it said that active stretching is better than passive stretching, change my mind. And it's kind of a little tongue in cheek because I already know that this active stretching, what I'm going to introduce you guys today, is definitely a better thing. And when I say better, I don't mean that there's absolutely no use for passive type stretching and that we should just throw it all the way out. I'm just saying that this type of active stretching in most cases is far better. So there's still a place for passive stretching. I'm not really going to talk about that here today, but what we really want to talk about is what is the active stretching that I'm talking about and why is it better than just your standard passive stretching. So first, the big thing, this is kind of a controversial thing because it goes against a lot of stuff that we might believe, and especially yoga teachers like myself, a lot of the stuff we were taught is like get in these poses and just get to that deep stretch and then hold it there. And we're going to talk about why that type of stretching isn't really ideal compared to what I'm going to introduce you today. It's a little bit more what I like to call active. Now, the real paradox here is that the more passive stretching that people traditionally do is actually, ironically, much more aggressive. It's much more, has much more chance to damage your body than the active stretching that I'm going to show you today. And that seems a little weird. You'd think like active is, of course, like I'm doing stuff. I'm more likely to get hurt if I'm doing stuff than if I'm just being passive. But I'm going to explain to you exactly why this kind of active stretching is much more effective and safer. So let's go ahead and dive into that. So what we're going to do, and I'm just going to do this by means of using one of the most classic and most simple stretches or yoga poses or whatever you want to call it, and really just give you the experience, because I try to talk about it, I try to explain it, but at the end of the day, words kind of fail at describing what it is that I really mean. So now I'm going to show you how to do it yourself. I'm going to show you the difference, and I'm going to let you experiment yourself, and you can go ahead and try it out. So let's just go with this is a little pose that in yoga we call Paschimottanasana. It means that we're stretching essentially the backside of the body. What we mostly know it as is a seated forward fold. I'm going to sit and I'm going to stretch. Now, when most people do this, and most professional stretching and yoga books and all this stuff, what they show is something like this. This, I'm going to just come out and right here and say, is not a good idea. It's not a good idea to do this position. This is a bad idea. And really simply, we can just show why it's a bad idea by the fact that if I don't adjust anything in my upper body and I just kind of come back, I am now in the same exact posture that I sat at my computer desk all day and that brought me to yoga because it hurt my back. But what I'm actually doing now is I'm in that posture. I'm adding even more pressure to the neck, and I'm even giving even more strain to the lumbar than I had when I was sitting at my computer. And then if we add on to that the idea that I'm being completely passive while I'm there. That means that I'm in this fold and I'm just letting go. That means that there's no internal support. There's no core support pulling in. There's nothing making sure that all that's being held together, that my spine is getting support and all these other things that we need in order for us not to be causing more trouble than good. And so here's another point to look at with this. In order for me to feel a passive stretch down the back of my legs, which we assume is the point of doing this forward fold. That's what everyone says, stretch your hamstrings. Now I can tell you that many people that do this pose don't feel a stretch in their hamstrings, and we're going to get into why. But when we fold passively like this, look how far I have to bring my body forward for me to even feel a stretch back here. Just now, with my face pretty close down to my legs, now I start to feel a stretch in my calves and a little bit in the hamstrings, mostly really calves. Now the problem with that is that, so in order to get a stretch at all, I have to move myself into this extreme position. And in that extreme position, I'm now jeopardizing things like my lumbar. I'm teaching my cord to be flopped out, which we don't want. I'm probably crushing my neck, unless I'm one of the very few people who is mindful enough to bring that chin in and find that length through that. But even that action of bringing the chin in and finding strength would be included in what I like to call active stretching. Because most people, when they get passive, if they're doing any activity, they're just trying to pull themselves deeper so that they can feel more stretch. So what this means is that in order to get a stretch, I have to put myself into an extreme amount of fold compared to what we will get when we get into our active stretching. With active stretching, you don't need to go nearly as far, and you don't need to put yourself in situations where in order to stretch your legs, you're now jeopardizing your neck and your back and your shoulders and other stuff as we just flop forward. So that's a little bit about why I'm not a huge fan of just getting in a pose and then being passive there. Again, it doesn't end up being passive, it ends up being more aggressive because people want to feel more stretch, and the only way to feel more stretch while being passive in your fold is to try to bring your body forward more. So people don't end up passive, they end up straining to get forward. And I've seen that a million times. I did it for years. Most people that are doing stretching for gymnastics or yoga or whatever, most people are doing that. I want us to try to move past that. And so that's what I see to be the problem with that thing, with the passive stretching. What I really want, though, is to introduce you to the idea of this more active and mindful and intentional stretching. Because again, most people get lost in that whole thing. When they go into the forward fold, they're technically trying to stretch their legs, but what I find, most people are trying to get into a pose. They're trying to get their face on their shins. And what that means is that in order for me to get my face down there, I'm going to make all kinds of twists, and I'm going to play into all the compensation patterns that are causing me pain and trouble in the first place, and I'm just going to accentuate those. So we're going to put that aside. We're not trying to get in a pose. I don't want you to ever put your face on your shin. That's far less practical of a skill than you might imagine. There's no real reason that you ever need to put your face down there. What instead we want to do is stay intentional. My intention in a forward fold, as we mentioned earlier, is to stretch the back side of my legs, to stretch the posterior chain of my legs, right? So the way that I'm going to do that, instead of jerking my body forward, is I'm just going to sit up tall. So already, instead of rounding my spine and arching my neck, I'm taking that all the way out. I'm going to lift my ribs. I'm going to keep my chin in. And then what makes this an active stretch is that we're doing activity while we're there. So in order to gain a stretch on the back of my legs, instead of folding forward here, I'm just going to curl the feet back. Now what this does is it creates engagement in the muscles on the front of the shins, which are the opposing muscles to your calves. If you get enough of a pullback from that and you start to practice this more, you might even feel that some of the quadriceps activate here, which will help the hamstrings to stretch. So what you can get is by not, for many of us, just sitting tall, curling the feet back, and then adding in the final other component, which is feeling your sit bones that you're sitting on, trying to slide backwards, you will feel a very significant stretch here without having to lean forward at all. But even if you don't feel that much, you only have to lean forward a little bit. And as long as you maintain high ribs, chin in, sit bones sliding, feet curling, you just saw me. I got my face all the way down on my shins earlier, just a moment ago. Right now I feel more stretch down my calves than I felt when I was all the way down there. I'm still able to keep my spine in a nice straight line. I'm able to keep my lumbar from getting compressed. I'm able to keep my ribs big, and I'm able to feel everything and that's happening. Because I'm not now trying to force into a pose. I'm here feeling a stretch, feeling it out. And this again is more in line. Not only is this better physiologically, but this is more in line with actual yoga philosophy. The attempt to get into a pose is an egoic thing. I'm trying to get into a shape so I can snap a photo and post it on Instagram, and everyone's like, wow, look how flexible that person is. That's going to lead you into injury. It almost always does. Ego leading the way in that way is not a great idea. The point of yoga is to be mindful of your body, of your breath, of what's happening now. So as I sit here and find my stretch, I'm thinking about my activations. I'm thinking about what I'm feeling as a result from them. Do I feel my two sit bones pulling back evenly? Do I feel my 2 feet pulling back evenly? I no longer have a goal of getting to somewhere else. My goal is just entirely here in the present, feeling and finding balance in a very simple position. The other side of this, when we say that it's better physiologically, is that stretching and opening tissue in your body, we want it to be, in a sense, a conversation. It has to have a balance. Everything has to have a balance. And this is another yoga principle we hear all the time, this balance between strength and softness. If I'm just here doing nothing, that is all softness. And again, there's a place for that. I'm not going to say that there's not. But in our regular practice, it doesn't bring in the balance of having one thing open as the other thing closed, having the inhale and the exhale work together. That's the basis of a yoga practice, the balance of these opposing forces. Turns out that physiologically, that actually works out better as well. Having these muscles active as a means to stretch the calf muscles, our gastrocnemius, soleus back here, actually makes a safer and more effective stretch for those muscles. It also makes them more likely to find a balanced state. Because the thing is that if you have tight calves, that pretty much automatically means that the muscles on your shin on the front are going to be, we might call loose or a little bit more dormant, because they've been overstretched, overpulled by the tightness of your calf. So stretching the calf is only really half of the picture. If all I do is stretch my calf and I don't bring some balanced tension or strength back to the other side, it is almost 100% chance that when I go back out in the world, the calves are going to tighten up again, because something down here has to hold you up, right? And what's happening now is that, let's say the calf is doing all that work, which is why it's tight. What we want is to restore balance so that both of them work in the way that they're supposed to, and neither one is too dominant over the other. So as I know that I have tightness back here, and I know that I have therefore weakness up here, when I do my active stretch, I'm basically doing both things at the same time, which is saves you a lot of trouble. You can just be getting one thing strong, getting the other thing open at the same time. The other thing is that when we actually start to practice this, and that's why I want you to try this in this pose, you'll feel other little things that you might even be able to see on my body. And I'll try to show this. Hopefully you can see this. They're generally subtle internal things, but they sometimes have an external kind of a show to them. So really the thing to look for when you're doing this fold is what kind of actions can I do that automatically cause that transverse abdominis I always talk about, that internal core muscle, to activate in. Not to force it in, I'm not drawing it in, but are there actions I can take in the rest of my body that will create that? And that's why we chose the ones that we did. If I'm here, if I lift my ribs, tuck my chin, and then curl back the feet, you'll see a little activation at the belly there. And then if I feel those sit bones slide back, you'll see I can feel it. This firms in, the ribs are big, my spine feels tall, there's no pressure at the lumbar. I'm actually now also getting work at the middle back by lifting those ribs and feeling those sit bones slide back, and that's really good. So this is kind of my point. If I'm having to go into this, I'm now risking and jeopardizing other important areas of my body to get a stretch that I could get in a more effective and safer and better way by just doing this. And now not only am I not jeopardizing the rest of those areas, but I can actually use every pose just like this to bring better alignment to every part of my body. So not only am I getting the stretch that I wanted, not only am I getting the strengthening in the areas I wanted, but I also have the opportunity to maintain good posture up top, which means that I'm not hurting myself there. I'm actually strengthening my body in all regards. And this is the real thing about active stretching like this. These actions aren't about how strong I can curl my feet back or how strong I can curl back. We're not going for excessive energy. In fact, that will almost always cause more problems itself. We're going for accuracy. We want to feel what is happening. When I curl my feet back, do I really feel those shin muscles activate? Do I feel like one foot's in another place, or I feel any of those imbalances? Which again, that's what yoga is about, being present and feeling what's happening now, not trying to get into some stretch or trying to get into some pose, trying to get deeper into a pose. That is not what it's about. So again, I know that this is a big controversial thing. This is a really deep subject, and I know it ran long, and I try to just, put this in the simplest way that I could and really give you the sense of urgency to try this out and see how does this feel compared to the other way, the way that I've been doing, where I just sit in my fold. How does it feel to bring that strength component, that balance of strength and softness into it? Where I'm getting activation where I need it and I'm getting stretch and opening where I need that. Because that's really our problem, you guys. I might be tight here, but that means I'm loose here. And if I just stretch here and I don't strengthen there, then it's going to tighten right back up. And that applies throughout the body. And I use this simple seated forward fold because it's one of the most basic stretches and poses that we have. But there's very specific ways that we want to be doing this throughout our yoga practice, throughout all the poses. Even in the most complicated poses, there's certain actions, certain activities that we can be doing that drastically change the safety and the effectiveness of that pose and of that stretch. So that's what I wanted to get across. If you think that I'm totally crazy and that this is a bunch of BS, you could just ream me in the comments below. If you think that this is the coolest thing ever because you actually tried it and you realize like, hey, this actually feels a lot better, you can, tell me maybe that I'm pretty cool. You can like or subscribe to this. But really what I want you to try it, because if you sincerely try this and you do it in the way that I've shown you here, you're going to feel those differences. You're going to feel how much more mindful that practice is and how much less straining it is. I'm not forcing into poses. I just go as far as I need to feel it and then stay there. And if you do it long enough, and if you practice it this way long enough, you'll feel how much more effective it is at really changing the shape of your body. And again, it goes much deeper than this. There's more that we can discuss. So if you want to go deeper in it, let me know. I'll make follow-up videos to this where we talk about using the breath to contour and create these actions and all kinds of cool stuff like that. But I just wanted to give you an introduction because I realized that post that I made was a little bit cryptic and maybe not everyone knew what the difference, what I meant and what I consider to be active stretching. Because that's what I consider to be active stretching. I don't want you to force poses. That's a terrible idea. Feel poses. Feel your body. You're not here to force it. You're not here to abuse yourself. You're here to know yourself and to take good care of yourself. So that's all I got for you guys today. If you got any questions, comments, you can drop those down in the comments as well. But I hope that you can take this to heart because this has really changed my practice. It's changed a lot for all my clients and all my students, and it can really change a lot for you. So you guys take care out there. Have a wonderful evening or day or morning or whatever you are, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.